So thank you everybody for letting me come along and have a chat tonight. Super nice to talk to you. Just super bit of information about Digital Yacht. We're a UK-based manufacturer, which there's not many of us left now. We got a Queen's Award for Enterprise a few years ago. We export to 100 different countries, and we're really proud of what we make and do in the world of recreational and commercial marine electronics. So the idea of tonight is just to have a chat about what's actually going on in the world of navigation and so on. It's not a sales spiel at all. It's very much about what's happening, where things are going, different ideas, and so on. And obviously there'll be a little bit of Digital Yacht product in there, but the idea is that we just have a chat about product. And what I always like to do is to kind of go back to what happened in the olden days. And this is one of my favorite slides, you know, back to the caveman days. If we're talking about super modern education and things, back in the caveman days, people used to follow around, follow footsteps, follow a path, that type of thing. But of course, when they got to the water, they were kind of stuck because there were no more footprints to follow, and they were done for. And then actually, it wasn't until the year of 1400 that a compass was introduced, which is amazing, really. It took ages and ages for people to discover compasses, and then it was another 300 years before ship's logs arrived and sextants. So that was like 1700, so another 300 years. And then if we jump forward another 360 years, we get to 1964, which is when the US first launched a satellite navigation system. There was something called Transit, which was it gave you a fix like every 3 or 4 hours in the ocean, and then you had to do dead reckoning after that. But it was amazing in its time, and people found that amazing. Then jump forward another 30 years, so we've moved from 300 years to 30 years, and we get to GPS. And of course in the UK we had things called Decca, and in the US they had Loran, but GPS came on board back in 1994. Start of the Gulf War. It gave very accurate position fixes, and only worked for a few hours a day, but everybody was like absolutely amazed by the whole thing. And on the left there you see one of the first GPS navigators, a product made by Magellan in the US. I remember it cost £2,000 back then, so it's probably like £10,000 today. And that was a GPS, and everybody was amazed. Ran on some batteries, gave you a fix. So actually we've kind of accelerated from 300 years or 1,000 years into 30 years and seen this like massive change. So I think what we want to talk about now is where we're at in 2025 and where we're heading. So let's take a look. First up, I think the GPS positioning, or positioning on a boat, is like the key navigational fundamental. If we know where we are on a chart, we can see where we are. That's like absolutely needed for navigation. And we've kind of got spoiled in the last 20 years with GPS being available on everything from phones to multifunction displays and so on. We've got a choice of navigation systems now. So it's not just GPS, which was funded by the American Department of Defense. We also have GLONASS, which is funded by the Russians, maybe not so reliable at the moment. We have Galileo, funded by the EU. And we also have Beidou, which is funded by the Chinese. And all of those satellite constellations basically will be working behind the scenes in your GPS navigation product to produce a fix. As a company, we produced a product called QuadNav last year, which took into account all those different constellations and calculated a fix, which allowed it to be more accurate than just a traditional GPS receiver. But actually, there's lots of things happening. You've probably heard about aeroplanes that can't land in Finland at the moment because of spoofing going on from the Russians, and lots of other problems. I've certainly experienced being next to places where GPS just drops out or GNSS just drops out. And I think we've all become so reliant on positioning that we need to think about what we're going to do going forward. So from a Digital Yacht perspective, what we're coming up with is a new product which uses two frequencies. The Americans have recently added an extra set of frequencies to GPS, which makes it more difficult to spoof. So traditionally, we used to use frequencies called L1. Now there's these new frequencies called L5. And very few devices at the moment use those new frequencies. There's literally just a handful of products in the world that do that, but it's coming online fast. And by using those two different frequencies, you can avoid spoofing issues, interference issues, and so on. And those two frequencies are also used by other satellite systems like Galileo, Beidou, and there's also an Indian satellite system called NavIC, which operates over the Indian Ocean at the moment, but will go global. So we've now got a choice of these 4 or 5 different satellite networks capable of giving us super accurate position fixes. And I see a change coming going forward where we'll want highly accurate L1, L5, what we call GNSS, position fixing receivers, which are now being used a lot in aviation, but will also come into being in maritime, because positioning is like super important going forward. So what we're looking at now is a product called OneFix. It's one of our new products, not out yet, it's coming shortly. And this will be an L1, L5 positioning receiver, not super expensive, around £300, works with any system, integrates with all the different NMEA networks, which we'll talk about in a sec. Has wireless as well for iPads and tablets, which are becoming super popular for navigation, can record tracks and export them. So kind of a new generation of position fixing. So I think what we've done is take something that we've taken for granted, like GPS that's in every device, and then come up with some exciting new stuff, which is going to be more accurate and so on for the future. The other big step change in navigation is AIS. So we got involved with AIS 10, 12 years ago. I'm sure most of you are familiar with AIS, but basically it's a system that sends position data from one boat to another using VHF frequencies. It's not sent through your VHF radio, but the AIS on board your boat has those details. Every commercial boat over 300 tons has to carry an AIS transponder, sending its position all the time. So you can always see, if you look on marine traffic and so on, you can see positions of boats all around the world. So let me just get rid of that. So sorry. And I think AIS has really made a step change in navigation. You can identify boats, you can see where your friends are. Unlike radar, it gives you a very clear indication over an electronic map. You have the ability to see around corners as well, identify targets. So we see AIS as being increasingly important going forward, and more people installing AIS on boats and using AIS in terms of general navigation. Next thing I'd like to talk about is how things interface on board boats. And it's worth having a little look at the history of how everything fitted together. So 20 years ago, there was something called NMEA 0183. NMEA stands for National Marine Electronics Association. It's the kind of industry body that dictates how products talk to each other. And the idea was that you could get a GPS to talk to a chart plotter, or a fish finder to talk to an instrument, and so on. And that was developed over the last 20 years using a very simple protocol. Now, everything in the last 10 years has moved to something called NMEA 2000. Like everything with marine, it was a bit behind the times. It was designed to be in 2000. It didn't really impact the whole world until about 2010, but now it's well and truly invested in the marine electronics industry. And items can basically connect into what we call a backbone, which you'll see here. It's like a simple, it is like a backbone. The things tee off the backbone to connect. So it means your plotter could talk to an autopilot, your GPS can talk to instruments, your wind data can be shared across the system. And it's also manufacturer agnostic as well. So you can share stuff around the network regardless of what brand of product you've got. And that's something that Digital Yacht have really embraced. We make things that take the old data and put it onto the new network, and we make things that take data off the network and then put it into iPhones, tablets, and so on. But I'm not talking about products and things today, but I just wanted you to understand about the fact that there's lots of interfacing excuse me, going on, and sharing data across networks is super exciting. The next step that's happening now is that those NMEA networks are also able to integrate with what we call IP, like Internet Protocol networks. So things on the boat are now starting to go into the cloud, starting to communicate via mobile devices and so on. So the Internet Protocol side of things is coming on thick and fast. So it's good that the whole boating industry has taken up these interfacing standards, now moving on to like a new protocol going forward. So something that's allowed to do is to start using iPad and tablets for navigation. I think at the last count, there's hundreds of millions of iPads available in the marketplace. It's an amazing device, super bright screen. It's got much higher resolution than a traditional chart plotter and so on. And obviously it forms itself as being an amazing navigation tool with apps that are able to provide charting at a much lower cost than other dedicated devices. So Digital Yacht make devices that take boat data like AIS, GPS, instrument data, and pop that into an iPad seamlessly. So you literally just connect up your iPad when you're on board the boat, and you'll see there's pictures where data can come across, or you can see your position on a electronic chart and so on. So really the big question is, what do you need on board a boat these days? Do you go out and spend a few £1,000s on buying a dedicated chart plotter display, or can you just survive on using an iPhone or a tablet on board boat and so on? So I think that when you look at that, you look at the cost of a chart plotter, dedicated chart plotter. It can range from a few £100s. But the moment you start adding a big screen, like a 12-inch screen, you're into a few £1,000s. So there's a big jump in terms of price and screen size, regardless of whether you buy a Garmin or a Raymarine or a Navico or a B&G, whatever you buy. Those devices are quite expensive. And do they do much more than an app can do on an iPad? The genuine answer is no, they don't. But the one advantage they do have is that they're waterproof, they're quite tough, you can see them in sunlight, you can probably add other functionality into it, it's built into the boat all the time. But what we see is more and more people using iPhones, tablets, iPads on board a boat for general navigation. And maybe if it's not the primary navigation, like the one that's at the helm, they use something down below, or vice versa. You've got a tablet that uses the chart table, but you have a chart plotter at the helm and so on. So I think going forward, a mix of product is something that's quite interesting. And I don't think you should reject the idea of using tablets and so on for navigation. You get a bigger selection of charts. When you navigate to France, you can start using some of the French charts that aren't necessarily available on your Garmin or your Raymarine product, but yet are available on the iPhone or iPad. So you can take advantage of the very latest Schom charts from France. Same if you're going to Germany, same if you're going to Holland, all those things, much cheaper charts, better updated and so on. So all quite exciting there. So we love the idea of tablet navigation. We make devices that allow data from your boat to get onto the tablet so that your GPS, AIS and instruments and so on can be used. In terms of apps, there's literally hundreds to choose from. There's instrumentation apps, there's charting apps, there's apps for racing, if you're interested in racing, with time to ley line and true wind angle, true wind speed calculations. Some apps to look at. Navionics is obviously amazing and lots of people use it. It's the most popular, but there's also lots of other. Aqua Maps is super nice. TZ iBoat, I really like now. They've just updated all their charts. That's incredible. Navlink is another one. So there's a ton of different apps there that you can use. And the beauty of apps is that they cost a few pounds as opposed to a few £1,000s for a chart plotter. So I think that's something that's exciting going forward. The other thing that can happen is you can start to integrate Bluetooth sensors into your boat system. There's lots of things going on in the consumer world with little low-cost sensors, which traditionally would have cost a lot of money for a boating system. So this is a little tag called Ruby. It's a Finnish company that sell it. You can buy it online for €50, something like that. It's amazing. It runs on a coin cell, and it's a barometric pressure sensor, a humidity sensor, and a temperature sensor. And I think we all forget about barometric pressure. Super important part of boat weather monitoring. You can quickly tell if the barometric pressure drops by a few millibars. You know that you've got a problem coming along in terms of weather, and we all forget about that these days. But actually, it's a given. And if more people took notice of that, there'd be a lot less disasters and things that went on. It's a nature's fundamental. So this little sensor you can dot around the boat if you want to monitor multiple areas for temperature and so on. But what we've done is create a device that can take that data and then put it up onto your boat's multifunction display. So if you've got a Garmin display or a Raymarine or a Navigo display, you can put barometric pressure up onto that really quickly with temperature and so on. So this is kind of the thing that you can do with iPads, tablets, and NMEA integration. The other thing you can start doing is you can start crowdsourcing data with iPads or tablets. So this is a great picture. I love this one. And I think when people look at it, they think, oh yeah, this definitely wasn't on the chart. But we've all seen that happen before. And the reality of it is lots of charts aren't up to date. And we can all make that better by every time we take a passage. We can try and improve that data. And one of the things the Navionics app does is allow you to record depth data from your boat system, and Navionics then take that and redraw the chart at a later date. So on the left there, we see the chart actually just going into a harbour in Poole that was on the hydrographic office chart as just showing a dredged channel. We then took a little workboat, we drove it around, as you can see in the middle shot, and that data was then uploaded to Navionics. This goes back some time now. And then within a month or so, Navionics had updated the chart to show a redrawn area of what's going on. And that's available for everybody using Navionics today. So if you integrate Navionics with a depth system on your boat, that data can be uploaded to them. Navionics is now part of Garmin, and that chart gets redrawn for the benefit of everybody. So another super interesting thing that we can start doing with technology now. There's also another American app that's just launched called Ditch, which is very interesting. What they do is they look at AIS traffic profiles. So they see where people go in and out of a harbour or in and out of a marina, use the AIS transmissions, and then create what's an ideal route going into or out of a harbour. So I think this is all exciting stuff, how we're sharing data and allowing people to do different forms of navigation from before. It's a bit like the old caveman used to like follow in the footprints and things. Now we're able to put an AIS footprint up on a chart and then people can follow that. The other thing is about alerts on a boat and alarms. When you're traveling along and you hear a beep, 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 beep on your echo sounder or your device, whatever is on the boat, you don't really know what it's for. You don't really know what alert is important. There's no priority. On a car dash now you get like a little screen that pops up and tells you what's going on. So we see alerting and monitoring as becoming something that's super important. And we produced a device called Navalert, which connects to your boat system and allows you to set an alert for any particular parameter on the boat's data network. So if you've got a big boat network, it could be depth, it could be wind, it could be an AIS collision alert. But equally, if you've got engines and generators and electrical things connected into the boat's network, you can set things like battery voltage, charge current, as the shore power got disconnected, all those other things. And that creates an alert and pops it up onto a multifunction display telling you what the alert is. Also creates an audible alert and can even send you an SMS message to your phone. So it's great for like remote monitoring and so on. So we think alerting and monitoring is going to be super important for the future, and something that's exciting and something to think about. It will make navigation safer, easier, if we can see exactly what's going on and set parameters for what we want. Next thing is internet connectivity. The internet's brought a lot to us, obviously, not just for watching Netflix and things on board boats, but for email, web. During the pandemic, people were super interested in working from boat, but that carries on today. Lots of people want to work from their boat whilst they're enjoying their boating experience. Weather, obviously, email, all those different things. So the internet on board boats now has become increasingly important. And I think it's worth just quickly looking at what you can do to get internet afloat. A couple of options. Obviously, you can just use your mobile phone that you've got in your pocket, but that will probably drop out a few miles offshore. So we make systems that give you connectivity up to about 25 miles offshore that you can install on your boat. Everybody can come on board and get connectivity. Elon Musk's Starlink system, super popular. It's also super expensive. For maritime use now, it's costing $500. But even so, if you want, sorry, I'm still working in the. I've still got people calling me. I'm so sorry about that. Sorry, let me carry on. So Starlink is very interesting. Lots of people super interested in it. And if you're doing ocean sailing, it's amazing. But it's not the answer really for coastal type internet. So if you're literally sailing across the channel 25 miles offshore, 4G, 5G still remains the most popular option for connectivity on board. But once you've got connectivity, all those things can come there: entertainment, weather, email, alerts, and also uploading data into the cloud. And this is something that we've just introduced this year. We've got a cloud platform. So that's taking your boat data and putting it up into the Internet of Things cloud. We've partnered up with a US company called VM, who are super smart on the Internet of Things thing for industry, but they're also heavily into maritime as well. And basically you can now easily put all your data up into the cloud for all sorts of things. Historical analysis, so you can look at trends. You could look at, did my engine temperature increase over a period of time? And if you see gradual increases, that probably indicates there's an impeller problem and so on. Did my boat ever go into water less than 6 feet deep? Might be interesting if you're renting a boat and running a charter business. But there's a ton of stuff you can do in terms of historical analysis, but also for monitoring. You can see where your boat is, what it's doing, and so on. And we see this whole cloud connectivity type of thing really becoming quite exciting for the future. And then, of course, it's bi-directional as well. So you can send data back to your boat. So you control things. You can switch things on and off. And then you can add some AI functionality. So you can ask AI to look at what things are going on in your boat and come up with an idea. So cloud is where we see lots of changes and things happening going forward. But finally, and this is one of my favorite shots, I grew up with all these instruments. On the left there's an old flashing echo sounder. In the middle, there's a log, which was from 50 years ago or something, in the traditional compass, and then a C-voice VHF radio, which I remember with crystals inside that you had to change the crystals for different frequencies. So actually we're still using a lot of these things, and actually they've done this really well for the last 50 years. But I hope that's given you just a little idea of where we see some of the technology changing and the things that are going on. So that's all I've got to say for tonight. I'm very happy to answer any questions anybody's got, and maybe we can go from there.
Nick, thank you very much indeed. That was fantastic. Let's stick our hands together and just to say thank you, albeit muted most of us. We've got any questions? Andrew Reeve. Andrew, you've raised a hand. Would you like to switch your mic on and fire away?
Yes, sorry, I pressed the wrong button.
Oh, we can hear you, Nick. Yeah, we can hear you, Andrew. That's fine. Fire away.
So I'm sorry, I pressed the wrong button. I haven't got a question.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Martin's got a question. Martin, fire away.
Yeah, so hearing a lot about artificial intelligence now, and do you think that, I think it's probably already possible to do it now, to kind of program your boat to go somewhere and up it will go?
Yeah, I think so. I think artificial, and obviously everybody's talking about AI these days, and it's like crazy, isn't it? You use it as like a description for everything. But you know, artificial intelligence is things like Garmin's auto routing program, or many of the other chart plotted programs where you can say I'm starting from here into there, and my boat's got 6-foot draft, and I don't want to go into any water less than 10 feet, and it can draw a map or a chart for you as to where you should go. That's been around for a while. I think there's more and more stuff that's gonna come on online that will be available, and I think AI shouldn't be taken for granted. I think it's going to be quite exciting. Also, crowd sharing, you know, just the fact that you can see where other people have been on AIS, and then use AI to quickly draw out paths that other people have used, seems pretty sensible to me. If you see a boat that's gone into every port and you can see that track line, why not follow that? They were safe, so why shouldn't I be safe? So I think we'll see loads of stuff like that, and AI for monitoring, looking at engine characteristics, sailing characteristics if you're racing. So I think that's going to be exciting for the future.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Anybody? I just quickly wanted to ask you about the relationship between NMEA 0183 and NMEA 2000, because there will be some people who'll have, you know, the older kit. And are there any particular considerations or suggestions you would give if they want to try and move stuff forward, but they don't necessarily want to ditch what they've already got?
So that's a really good question. So NMEA 0183 was developed 30 years ago, something like that. It's a simple 2-wire connection. So it's 2 wires, and essentially you have a talker that sends data to something that's receiving stuff. So something sends data to something that's receiving. So you could have a GPS sending position to a chart plotter. You could have an AIS sending AIS data to a chart plotter. Problem is that there's not a lot of bandwidth on that 2-wire connection. It actually started off in the early days just sending GPS data at a baud rate of 4,800 baud. So it's like 4.8 kilobits a second. It's like super slow, and it finally moved to something at 38.4 kilobits a second for AIS data and things. Still used massively in the commercial industry, and it allows one device to talk to another. Then NMEA 2000 got introduced. That was a system where you could have up to 50 devices all running on a CAN bus network, which is an automotive type network, which is super secure, but very slow, but allows data to be sent from one device to another. And that's kind of what the industry has adopted now. And you can convert data from one format to the other. So if you've got an NMEA 0183 device, you can convert it to 2000. So you may have an old AIS receiver that won't work with or may not work with a modern chart plotter, and you can convert that data from one format to the other. But you can also take the modern data, the NMEA 2000, back to the old format NMEA 0183. And lots of people do that. If you've got an old VHF and you want to get position into it from a new Garmin or Raymarine device, you can do that. And we do devices that do exactly that. So you don't have to junk all your legacy product just because you bought a new system. And I think that's super important. There's no point in throwing away all those good things just because you bought a new system. So the two can intercommunicate, but not just by wiring the wires together. You need like a little device in the middle to do that. And interestingly, the commercial world still runs pretty much on the older NMEA 0183 data standard. So you walk onto a bridge on a ship, their ECDIS system is still wired up with the old stuff, not the new stuff. So both are reliable, both work really well, but they're slow, old, and certainly not up to the sort of latest IP standards that we're used to at home in the office and everything else. But the good news is you can put that data into those formats if you want to.
And presumably by implication, Nick, that the little converter, if you like, that you need to make one talk to the other is something that's going to be around for a good while.
Exactly, yeah. And we've always made a point of trying to build those little converters. We even still make today and sell loads. There was a really popular range of instruments which Autohelm made, which were called ST50 and ST60. I'm sure if you go and have a look at the three instruments, the depth, the speed, and the wind that are on a lot of boats today, you see those old grey instruments made by British manufacturer Autohelm, and they got bought by Raymarine or Raytheon in those days. And we actually make a converter to convert that old proprietary data to the new one, because actually the instruments still work great and people just want to get that data into their new chart plotter. So I'm a great believer in that. I don't think you should throw stuff away just because it's old and have to change everything. I think that's one of our sort of ethos things.
Thank you. That's great. Yeah, and I would agree with not chucking stuff out if it ain't broke, as it were. Has anybody else got any questions? Would anybody else like to ask? John Sprange. John, far away.
Hello.
John, you just need to. You're unmuted. Yeah, away you go. Unfortunately, John, you're still mute. I don't quite know why, although the microphone symbol has gone off, or the microphone mute symbol has gone off. We can't hear you at the moment. If you wanted to type your question, then I'll just read it out, but I'm afraid at the moment we're not hearing you. Martin, did you have another question, or was your hand still up for the last one?
The reliability of what are essential to make products.
So about reliability?
Yes, in terms of exposure to the salt air environment.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a super tough environment for electronics to exist in. The marine industry is horrible. You've got UV from sunlight, you've got salt, you've got water, you've got massive temperature changes. It's pretty nasty environment for stuff to operate in. I think 10 years ago, things weren't, 15 years ago, things weren't as good as they are now. I think now things are really well engineered by pretty much every leading brand that exists. So things are waterproof, displays don't leak anymore, but also the quality of a tablet and an iPad on board a boat has got much better. iPhones are waterproof now. Consumer products are made in the hundreds of million devices rather than a few thousand and so on. So I think reliability's got much better, and I think genuinely, if you look at or certainly if we look at our, warranty and failure rates, it's much smaller, and I see that across the industry. It used to be 15 years ago, it used to be bad, but now things are pretty reliable, and once installed, will go on for a lifetime. The biggest problem is obsolescence. So things going out of date. I see somebody just popped up a question about OpenCPN and Raspberry Pi. So OpenCPN is a free of charge charting program written by a hardcore group of people that were interested in writing something. It's okay, but it's a bit rough around the edges. But you can't argue with something that's free. The biggest problem is the availability of charts. And basically, in the US, it's not a problem because the US give away charts. The NOAA charts are free. They're part of the government service. But in the UK, Hydrographic Office, and the same in pretty much every European country, you have to pay for charts. They're not free. So OpenCPN used some pirated, what's called CM93, which is an old commercial standard charts around Europe. It wasn't them that used it, but they created an ability for them to use it. So the charting data isn't that great on it. And it's a bit clunky, it's a bit old, but as a free product, it's pretty good. It's very slow on a Raspberry Pi. It's much better on a PC and a Mac. But I think if you spend a few pounds, you can start looking at much better PC-based navigation products. And I do believe that PC-based navigation is a really good way of going. So if you've got a laptop, Windows laptop, you can buy products like Time Zero, which is a very popular program that is actually a lot more powerful than buying a chart plotter. I think the software costs around $400, so it's not super cheap, but it's a lot better than spending $4,000 on a multifunction display, and you've turned your 15-inch laptop into something that's super powerful with weather routing, AIS overlays, all sorts of exciting stuff. So yeah, I really like all that PC-based navigation, iPad navigation, Raspberry Pis to run stuff. I think that's great and really keen to get going on it. And I think that's something that we should embrace for the future.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. There was another question from John. Aren't any nav apps compatible with a Chromebook?
So I actually use a Chromebook. This is my Chromebook, just to show you. And you can put Navionics on that. So actually a Chromebook will run an Android app, and you can put Navionics up on there and it works. And you get a nice little, it's actually doesn't quite fill the whole screen. It fills like 2/3 of it. So it's not perfect, but it does work. So you can use a Chromebook and run Navionics on it and get data into that. Personally though, I'd use an iPad or a tablet. I just think it's an easier method of viewing data. It's got a nice touch screen on it. You can move stuff around. It's probably a little bit quicker. And there's more apps available for the iOS and Android platform that you can just run on a Chromebook and so on. That's my thoughts.
That's lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Nick. Anybody else with any more questions?
No, it's at
Not at all. Thank you. That's been fascinating.
It's pizza time, so I've got to go.
That's lovely. Well, you've given us a really interesting insight, Nick. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
And
it's been recorded, so I will send it to you. But let's all just put our hands together and say thank you to Nick.